Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. Who is the awakening woman? She's a woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words in these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's episode is Ashley Stinson, founder of Energy Archeology and Skelementary School. Her unique modality centres around the wisdom enclosed in our bones. During our conversation, Ashley shares how this technique was revealed to her and her confidence in introducing this new method, how she uses energy archaeology to heal her clients, and the impact uncleared ancestral trauma has in our present lives individually and as a collective. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel you're most her?
That's something that I have, it's funny, it's been a practice that I've tried to infuse into everything, right? To live in that state. And right now being at home where everybody is together all the time, it's funny because I've noticed I've started dropping it. And so it's become much more of a conscious practice to get back into that higher energetic resonance, which for me means sitting down and deeply tapping into my own body, because that's how I connect to my soul. It's kind of going in to be able to then expand out. And so it's sitting down and just feeling the breath and noticing the sensation that I'm feeling in the body and letting myself sink into it, almost like you would sink into laying on a body of water or something, right? You just kind of let yourself sink. And I do that to bring myself deeply into myself. And it's everything just kind of starts to buzz. And that's whenever I know that I'm in that state and I'm really connected. And I can then kind of bring that back with me into everything else. And it's just this feeling of deliciousness.
Thank you. That's got to be one of the most delicious answers I've had about it. Really. It's so good. I love that question because because it's never really the same thing for anyone. Really, it's never the same answer, of course, because it's so individual. But then ultimately, it is really, because as soon as I ask the question, everyone has an answer. I don't think I've ever asked anybody and they've been like, what do you mean by that? They've been like, oh, I know that, immediately it totally makes sense. We know that there's a place to go to that's this thing, and then we're operating on this magic gear and everything flows. And like you says, fizzes and bubbles, and that's a delicious one. I like it. Thank you. It's great. And just to find out a little bit more about you, Ashley, so that people can really get a picture of how you are doing the work that you do right now, which is so unique. I don't think I've been aware of anyone who's doing what you do. So what led you to this work? And then also as well, if you remember as well, is because it is so unique to my knowledge, how were you then able to have the confidence to bring this modality out there, because not to say that, Reiki and astrologers and shaman are to a penny, but there are more of them. So even when you're moving into those things, you're like, oh, that's what I've got to do. And you're aware of it. Whereas I don't know if there's anybody doing what you do. So how did you get there, and where did that knowing and confidence come?
It was about a 3-year journey, really. So it can be a bit of a long story. I will abbreviate it as best I can. It really started for me with needing to tap into that place in myself, but not quite knowing how to get there. So the journey of finding out, how I get to my higher energetic resonance, really. So I was 27. I was pregnant with twins. I had a very traumatic birth experience with them, which at the time I didn't quite understand, but it was actually recreating my own traumatic birth whenever I was born. The similarities are just absolutely uncanny. And so there was this period of time after that where I was wrapped up in new motherhood. I had twins. Here in the United States, we don't get maternity leave. We don't get paid maternity leave. So I was trying to juggle, having them and going back to work after 4 months. And it was just kind of like this, it was also my Saturn return, speaking of astrology, right? So all of this stuff was happening at the same time. And it was just kind of like this utter breakdown, I think, that needed to happen in my life, because that led me to questioning pretty much everything. What is working, what isn't working, why isn't it working? Why am I in this career that I thought I loved and now I'm unhappy? How do I heal trauma that I don't know is trauma yet? So it's like this journey of discovery. And really, it started for me unpacking it through Reiki. I had a boss whose wife had actually given birth on 9/11, which here, in the United States, like the 9/11, right? Like the day that everything actually happened. And that was really traumatic for her. And so she healed by going to Reiki and having that, like someone really work with her energy. And so he recommended, that I would maybe like to try that. And at that point in time, I had never heard of it before. And I mean, this wasn't all that long ago. I'm 33 now, and I was 27 then. So I started going to a Reiki master, and it was like I would get this kind of feeling of relief and lightening of what I was experiencing, but then it would go away. It's like it wasn't quite getting deep enough. It would kind of relieve what had come to the surface and come up, but it wasn't sustainable for me. So I was like, okay, well, I either need to go more often or I need to learn how to do this. So she recommended me to go to her teacher. I started going to, or I started actually learning Reiki. And it took me a very long time. It took me 3 years to do it, because while I was learning, it was when my own modality was coming to the surface. And I also had very young kids. So juggling that kind of place of, I'm still working, I'm learning this new thing, it's not coming through me the way it seems to come through everybody else. And I have, very small kids. It took a very long time. So I had to just kind of set aside expectation that this was going to be anything. And I just had to let it be. I just had to give it its own space to come up. And a lot of that was through exploring with my Reiki master teacher. Thankfully, she's open to very non-traditional stuff. It wasn't all about the lineage and like, this is the only way it can come through. So we would sit down together and we would explore, and I would tell her, I'm not seeing the chakras and the aura. I'm not feeling this the way like you're explaining it to me. I'm seeing the bones. Like I would do practices that she would give us to do, and I would say, I'm not seeing that. I'm like, when I am doing this energetic thing, I'm only seeing your bones. I'm seeing where they're missing. I'm seeing where they're looking like something else. I'm seeing where they look like they're wanting to crumble. And I don't know what that means. And of course she's like, oh, I can't tell you what that means. Like, you're the only one that's going to be able to tell what that means. And so I took about a year and a half off between doing like level 2 and level 3. And worked with some other mentors who were more like intuitive guides and coaches. And that was the exploration that I needed, because they were pushing me to really question, why is it bones? What is it about the bones that speaks to you? What is it that they're saying? And through this kind of like beautiful culmination of events of working with like 4 different people at the same time, they each seemed to ask the right question that like then facilitated me kind of opening up and being like, oh, I finally get it. And I get what they're showing me and what they're here to show me. And because of the woman that I was working with through my Reiki lineage, she required practice sessions, which not all do. Every time I said that, people were like, oh, really? I had to do like 50 practice sessions between level like 1 and 2, and then 75, and then 90 between, you know, before she would consider you as a Reiki master. And it was while I was doing those practice sessions for free with whomever would volunteer for me to work with them, is whenever I really understood that the bones all have this meaning. Like they are almost like looking at the planets and being like, oh, Venus is, you know, love and beauty and whatever. Your shoulder blade is inner child. You know, like there's kind of this coding that is in our body that I can look at someone's bones and the energy in them and understand what's connecting to what and the story that it's painting, the way an astrologer looks at the sky and can look at your natal chart and say, oh, I see how these things are laying out and what that's going to mean in your life. And so for the bones, I'm not saying like this is your life path and your purpose based on what I'm seeing here. It's more like this is what you've inherited and how it's coming in. This is where it's stored in, you know, like your inner child. This is where you're carrying that for somebody else. This is how you're giving that back out to the world. And it's coming through, you know, like I mean, even our fingers all kind of have their own meaning. So if it's coming through really strongly in one finger or it's blocked in another one, I can look at it and say, okay, where are you feeling like you're not in your power? You know, if it's like something in the middle finger that's not really flowing well, or if, you know, it's something in the thumb, I can say, okay, where are we looking at issues of not feeling worthy, of where you're feeling like your worth is being devalued or where you're devaluing it yourself. And then look at what I call string lines and trace them back up through the body. And if it's going to like the pelvis on the left side, that's coming through the maternal lineage. You know, it's probably an inherited story that's coming through, that's living through them. Mm. So we begin to unpack from that point. And that's why I call it energy archaeology. It's digging in, you know, and it's bones.
It's amazing. And and for you to then say, okay, this is what I do and I'm going to bring it forward. Mm. How did you have that confidence to do that? Like I said, because it's so unique, and even those of us who kind of exist in this realm of taking on what will soon not be considered alternative, but you know what I mean, just yes. Different modalities anyway, but we kind of know the usual suspects, right? So how did you find that? I mean, you were sure about what you were doing to then step out and go, I've got this thing and there's no history that I'm aware of that does it apart from, but you know, but then when you put those two words together, energy archaeology, and you're doing the bones, then it's clear as day, you know. It's like, yeah, duh, duh us, you know.
I know, right? I think the answer to that is I couldn't not. Once I understood what it was, and yes, there was a lot of like my own deprogramming and deconditioning that came with being the good girl and the student, and how can I break from this lineage that I studied under. And what it came down to was I couldn't not talk about it. I couldn't do an energy healing session without bringing that in. And it felt like a really deep betrayal to try to kind of hide it and tuck it away. When I first started working, you know, I would talk about it as Reiki, or I would use hashtags that would kind of like, you know, bring in people that were looking for Reiki. And I found out really quickly that that was a terrible strategy because really what I was doing and what I do is not Reiki, you know? And so people would come in expecting something and it was very different. And I think that very blatantly put it in my face that I needed to talk about this so that we all had the same expectations going forward. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not expecting a Reiki session and I go in and I'm like, oh, so this is what your bones are doing. And you're like, wait a minute. What? So it was just that, I think, lesson that we all learn over and over and over again, to be truer and truer and truer to yourself, and more and more and more in alignment as you release the expectation of what something should be. And so I still struggle with language around it. I still, I'm still writing words on my website and words on Instagram and going, how does this convey what it actually is? Do people get it? And so, I don't think it's something that's like one and done and I talk about it and it's perfect. It's still evolving and I'm still learning more. And so as I do, I speak about it differently and the experience changes a little bit. But yeah, the short answer is I had to, that internal push, that soul nudge that you can't avoid.
Or you can try and it'll chase you down.
That's true.
And it will be there. So you're, better to do the easy thing and just launch it. I just wanted to ask, easy.
I know.
What does a session look like then if somebody comes to you? Are they with you in person? Do you work online? Is there any correlation between the way that you kind of use your hands like Reiki, or you're just kind of sensing something? What does it actually look like when someone has a treatment with you?
That's a great question. We're all online right now. And that's primarily, it's we are in lockdown, so everything is online, and beneficially it's always been online with me. And part of that is because the way I sense energy primarily is through clairsentience, which means I feel it in my own body. I have since trained myself to see it and feel things in different ways. But when I was starting out, like the only way I knew where to go and where to work on someone's body was I felt it in mine. And it was really amplified when we were together in the same room. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this distance. That way I'm not all of a sudden in crippling pain because I'm feeling what's going on in someone else's hip. And it just really evolved that doing things distance allowed me to play with my other senses as well. I started to see more. I started to hear things. I started to open to different ways of noticing that I don't think I would have had I always done them in person. So it's kind of been this really beautiful learning experience of working with someone online, but it's all done through Zoom, so we can see each other. And that just kind of helps to establish a baseline. I can really kind of see the person, connect in with their energy. And then at that point, I really shut down my eyes, because once I have that energetic connection in that sense, it's almost like a hologram of their body kind of appears. And it's the bones, and they're showing up metaphorically, or they're not showing up, or, there's kind of this whole world that exists energetically inside the skeleton. And when I shut my eyes, I can then just kind of shut down seeing what else is in my peripheral vision or what's going on behind the person that I'm working with, and really tune into that world. And it's, I've joked before that it's almost like crime scene investigation shows, where they have the boards and they have the yarn going to all these different places, and they can zoom in incredibly tight to one thing. That's what it feels like for me. So I'm using my hands, but it looks almost like I'm playing the piano in the air or the harp, because what I'm doing is I'm kind of combing through different string lines of energy. So I will start at, a bone that looks like it's missing, and I'm just kind of then looking out in the field, or I'm looking at a different bone in the body and saying, okay, where is the line disconnected? Where does it disappear so that the energy in this part of the body isn't coming online? And so a first session is different than every other session, really. In the first one, we do a general clearing first. I kind of get what I call the lay of the land. I see where the bones are showing up and where they're not. And then it's like I'm almost given an order by your higher self. We start here, we move here, we do this. And it is following those string lines. So we'll kind of move through the body in an order dictated by the person's highest self. I'm never the one who's dictating where we're going or what we're working with. And then we will connect up to the Earth Star chakra, which is really the only one I work with. It's below your feet. And it's really the chakra that connects to grids of consciousness, like collective consciousness bands, that kind of everyone connects into. It's like this beautiful, like layers and layers and layers of like this web that we all connect to, and we all share like information and energy and like thoughts and ideas and stuff in this energetic band. And what we do is we disconnect from ones that aren't serving you anymore. So thoughts, ideas, beliefs, things that you have outgrown, things that you no longer need to carry. And we end the session after we've gone through the bones and really cleared out what's been stagnant or stuck or like dim and dull and not showing up and really not resonating in your body. We then connect you to what I call like basically the Earth Star chakra, like the bands of collective consciousness, the grids for your best and highest good, the ones that are going to carry you forward, the ones you're stepping into. Mm-hmm. And so as we do that, then that grid comes up into your body and it connects. And that's what helps to really kind of integrate and carry you forward with the work that we've done.
That's beautiful. I was just like imagining all kinds of like in animation going on when you were doing that as well. Like, God, it would be great to just like have a visual of it all going on. No, it's not the easiest thing to do, but there's like, and when you what did I want to put next to it? I wrote forensic down, and it was, you were talking about what kind of words to use in order to, for copy and social media when you're trying to like, explain to people in a limited word count what it is that you do and what it is about. And it was just, I don't know, is it psychic forensic or energetic forensics, or I don't know, it's just, it kind of like popped out all of those things. And CS, and those I haven't watched for a while, but I really do like those forensic, when you're really digging down into the remains of something, and you're talking about how it can be like an ancestral trauma that you're carrying. So in effect you are bringing on the remains of your ancestors within yourself. What different how does that manifest in somebody's life when they are carrying those forensic ancestral traumatic pieces in their bones? What can that mean in terms of their experience, what they are experiencing, what they're unable to experience or enjoy in their present life? And how do you go about breaking that, and do you leave it back with them, or what is the process around that, or your thoughts?
It's so different every time. So yes, we can carry traumatic ancestral things, traumatic ancestral events. And we can also carry, traumatic ancestral events that happened, on a grand scale. And it's interesting because it usually shows up almost like kind of like a static in the field. It's almost like the field can't quite get tuned right, especially if it's something that's been like systemic trauma. But if it's something that's very individual, usually what happens is it shows up almost as like a pattern. And this is why I'm a big proponent for doing the energy work first and then the mindset work, because people will often identify a pattern and they'll be like, oh, it's in my mind, I have to switch my mindset. But if it's something that's coming through in a much larger way, the mindset isn't going to be able to shift unless the energy shifts first. Because it's kind of like it opens up the pathway then for the mind to basically reprogram its story and its patterning around things. And one of the ones that I see most, and this is probably because I primarily work with women, I mean, not intentionally, but I primarily work with women. And it's often around things like relationship or career, or some of those big things that just tend to be questions where our patterns come to the surface. And so in relationship, what will usually happen is we're looking at what that person is carrying in their body and how it's coming in. And as soon as I notice that there's like a connection in at the pelvis, I'm going to say it's something that's coming in ancestrally, you know, and we'll start kind of then going back through energetically through the ancestral plane. And it's a little bit hard to explain. Hopefully I can put this in like a metaphor that makes sense for people. The way I see the energy coming in through the ancestral plane to us is it flows in basically at the top of the pelvis, kind of, it's called the iliac crest, like the top of like the hip bones, that kind of like heart-shaped arch that we have at the top. But your ancestral plane looks almost like tree rings going out from you, or pond ripples. And so your closest ancestors, like the first generation of ancestors, are kind of that closest ring. And then the next one out is like their parents, and then their parents are out. And so as you go further out, you have far more ancestors than you do closer in. But I always call it a line of questioning, because as soon as I ask the right question, just energetically, I don't even have to ask it out loud, because I don't really want the person who I'm working with, I don't want their brain to get involved. I want to be seeing like energetically and the higher self, what they have to say, what they have to show. So I will ask questions silently. And what usually happens is it's almost like the kind of like this like pattern of Christmas lights turning on, is I will see like the line of ancestors that have carried this pattern. Say it's a pattern of like domestic abuse. And basically it will light up to the ancestor where it originated. And so I will then kind of almost like go out into the field, right? That zooming in, zooming out thing. I will zoom into that ancestor that had this pattern. And 9 times out of 10, it's not something that we need to be afraid of. It's not something that we need to like shun or shame or feel guilt around or anything like that. What we need to do is love it. And often being your own experience, it's like you're almost too close to love that situation, right? So that's where I feel like I'm almost kind of a surrogate in this, like this whole energetic world, where I can like very empathetically hold the space and witness, like, and I will, it's almost like a movie plays out in front of my eyes, witness the originating event that happened, how that has impacted, and be able to just shift the energy there through love, through forgiveness. And it's like as soon as that shifts, it's like there's a very visceral feeling to me whenever I'm like, okay, and it's healed, you know, and we've done the work we need to do. It will come back in, and it's like the person will feel it release in the hip or somewhere else in their body where it's been connected in. And usually it's followed with like tears, and there's an emotional release that comes with it. And we know we've broken that pattern.
Wow.
And it's, yeah.
Do you know what? Like, you probably can't see my writing here. It doesn't make any sense. But as that's supposed to say release. But as you were talking, I was like, had these words come to me, and I'm like, okay, I need to formulate a question around this, or just kind of bump these words to you as what was coming to me when you were saying that. And I had responsibility to carry, time travel, release. So let me turn that into a sentence. Because what I was seeing and almost feeling is like you're saying, it lights up, and you can kind of see it goes back to the circles right back, or the waves right back, until you can see exactly where it is. You can see the event that happened that created that trauma. And yeah, that person who goes forward, I'm like, is it, because I've had other things done, and almost where you feel that you're carrying something, you're responsible for carrying that trauma forward, in order to then, they know that you take it on board, and at some point you'll be able to find the place where it's released, because they realize that in that time, and I put time travel, in that time they didn't have the awareness to even think, it's all about survival, not about, sitting down and thinking about our traumas and releasing them and that's not what life was about there and then. So it's like, I'm going to implant this in my descendants, until I know at some point down the line they will be in a time and space where that can be released, and it will all ripple back, and it will ping off and everyone will be free. That's kind of what I was seeing when you were speaking. Is that the kind of thing that it is? Or, you know, because we always feel that we have to continue the good fight for all the, you know, for all the things that happened in our lineage.
I do think to an extent, yes. I do believe, and this is my personal opinion, that whenever we incarnate, we do agree to take on certain things for our lineage and for the collective. Because we know, our soul knows, our human self might struggle with it, but our soul knows that we have the tools that are going to come available to us on our path, or we will, you know, meet someone or form the right partnerships or whatever it's going to be that's going to bring that up so that we can finally heal and release it. I do also believe, though, that some of the stuff that has been carried on as a trauma, as an inherited trauma, could have been released sooner. And this is just through my own investigation energetically with our experience of death and how we die and how we bury our dead, how we ritualistically mourn or grieve or help them release.
Right.
And through my own exploration, and I will say, this is something that I'm really interested in, and I actually think this is where my work is going. I think that's why it comes up for me so much. Looking at how burial practices have shifted and how it's no longer about releasing the spirit. Like we kind of put a lot of toxic stuff into the body, and I feel like that toxicity and the environmental toxicity and the other stuff that we've kind of like created in this world traps stuff. We no longer have that release at death where everything that we have learned can be transmuted as wisdom. It's like it gets stuck, and I feel like the stuff that gets stuck is the stuff that gets passed down. There's, I think culturally, there have been so many really interesting burial practices that we've lost. Especially, like, there are many cultures who used to believe that the bones held wisdom. And it's funny because you don't, like, you really have to go looking for that. Like, right? I mean, I'm a researcher by nature. I was a scientist. So I kind of really love to follow these paths and these threads that validate that, yes, like, this is something that used to be believed really heavily. And it's something that we lost because in Northern European traditions, even in certain like Egyptian traditions, they preserved the bones because they felt like the bones are what held the earthed wisdom of the person. And so they would put these bones in like tombs or dolmens or just like ritual spaces. And that way their lineage could access the wisdom that was there. It remained on earth for their ancestors or for their descendants to be able to access what they had learned and the knowledge that they had gleaned. And everything else, you know, was transmuted and released at death. And we just don't do that anymore, you know? There's this breakdown between understanding the wisdom that our elders have and seeing them as a blessing and a guide, and seeing them as, you know, so often the case now, a burden. So I think it's a cultural shift that honestly we're going to be coming back to. And I know that this is what I'm going to be digging into more like later years, maybe.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a key thing there between inheriting trauma and inheriting blessings and what we carry forward that maybe we didn't need to.
Mm. Why do you think someone would on a soul level decide that they should continue this, carry this burden, carry this trauma forward? What would be the contract, as it were, to like take this on to the next life on their level, if it is possible for them to not have to bring it forward with them?
I think the short answer is I don't know that I've looked at it enough from that perspective to have an answer or have an opinion. But I really feel like everything that gets trapped eventually is looking for release. And it's as it's lived through in successive generations, really it's looking for release. It's looking for forgiveness, for love, for healing. And it's looking for that lesson to be integrated, because when the lessons aren't integrated, we get stuck in this loop, right? That we continue to live out that same pattern until we actually understand why. And we can, I don't even want to say heal and release, because oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it needs to be integrated. We need to have that like reconciliation with it, and that moment of like peaceful understanding and acceptance, before it'll really like become one with us and really release from the story.
That's cool. I like you saying that as well. And I think when you when we spoke before as well, when you were talking about death, it was, you know, talking about the chemicals that you know that we take on to preserve the body for who knows what reason, and not in a way that, in, like you mentioned, ancient times, where it would be more of an embalming and you do kind of worship and allow and kind of release the spirits and let them. I don't even know if maybe, you know, for me, talking about my death, is I've always felt that for me, I'd want to be cremated. I'd want to be literally ashes to ashes, you know, and don't even put me in anything that's going to be part of it. So I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know, but you know, I've never thought of having a place where, you know, and they're so congested as well, you know, like public cemeteries and everything like that. They're so congested, and they're so it is kind of like a real holding on to things as well. And I know it's like a controversial one, because people have their thoughts, but even from like, you know, on this as well, but from like personally, even from an early age, and my father passed when I was 4 years old. And I remember the day of the burial, and us standing over the grave, and he was a pastor in the church, so he was like the central figure to this community. So it was a really big ripple down for them to have this loss. It was totally out of the blue. He was a young guy, early 40s, sudden death. So it really rippled on with them, and I didn't really realize the ramifications of that until I got older and saw, you know, years later, people speaking to it. But I do remember even at that early age, when they, you know, I don't know why we're talking about this, but, you know, as an early age, going to the mortuary and seeing his body there, and just being like, this is just being really confused about the whole spectacle of everything. And subsequently, I've had experienced many deaths, you know, like different friends during different, almost like every 5 or 6 years, there would be like a significant death, and just being more and more confused by people's reaction. And I understand that, you know, okay, I know they're not here anymore, and I get that. That's sad, but there's something about this that's not making sense to me, and I can't quite put my finger on it, because, you know, when people are in grief, we kind of go a separate way about stuff as well. It's like, but they're not here, and I miss them, and all of this kind of stuff. And for me, it's always been like there'll be more of a communion. than there ever was when they're in physical. 'Cause sometimes things get in the way and feelings and stuff like that. But if there needs to be a connection or a communion with you, it's going to happen when they're released from that. I always felt that, and I felt that in particular when my mum passed, because, you know, towards most of her life, her illness meant that we couldn't have a relationship in the way that, you know, we'd talk and have that mother-daughter relation, whatever that looks like. But I always felt that when she passed, I would have a better relationship with her, because she would be free of her physical restrictions, you know, and it's energetic, it's symbolic, it's, you know, I can see and feel the thing. But you have to keep these things very private, because it's not, you know, most people aren't there because they're missing the physical presence of what that person is. You still hear and experience somebody guiding you and all of these kind of things. And even as a child, when I was doing something wrong, I could feel that I was being told off. I knew, even though I might, you know, I was like totally aware of this, you know, I'm like, this is not a good thing. So I knew from like a much earlier age that I was being guided from the other side. But then, of course, then I got swept up into what that looked like on a physical level, and then decided that I was lacking in certain things, you know, until I started to like wind and really understand that it's always been there. There's always been that information coming through. Yes. You know, so and interesting is like when you're speaking about just kind of trauma. I was speaking to a friend earlier today, and we were just talking about the world right now, what's happening. You know, just small like conversations. And she was saying, you know, with what's happening now, and it's, you know, there's obviously the issue with that people are dealing with working out what's happening with the lockdown and coronavirus, and how we're going to get society back as well. But also there's a real kind of rumbling and undercurrent and a waking up from people of just looking at the way the world is and assessing whether every bit of information that they get is true, and that we're on the brink of some sort of like awakening. And she said it reminded her of when she was 9 years old and she was in Germany and the wall came down. And that she is saying there's a similar kind of feeling in the air of, you know, she could feel there's a similarity of that wall coming down and there being like an opening up and more space. And she's got a memory of that same thing, of something's changing. And at first you don't even know what it looks like, but, you know, she had that, maybe you could call it trauma, or that memory in her bones, because she said when she was 9 and with her parents going out and everyone's kind of protesting and shouting, as a child you've got no clue what we're doing. Are we just out, you know? And we kind of like, but then years later, and she's feeling those same memories come up with what's happening now. So there's almost like that kind of bone level memory is almost as an indicator of when something else happens. It kind of reminds you on a level that, hang on, we've been here before, you know, and it felt like this, and this is what, there's nothing to fear, we're just going into a new space and we're not sure what that new space feels like. So can it also, instead of just being, oh my God, we went through this trauma and then this trauma is going to kind of hamper my experience, can it also be that it's a guidance?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think that definitely shifts depending on what the experience was. Like, obviously all of our ancestors have lived through vastly different shifts in what the world looks like. And breakdowns of systems and building of new systems, and that memory, I think, is what keeps so many of us in that place of like, it's been okay before, it's gonna be okay again. You know, it's going to look different. Maybe we're not going to know what it looks like, but, you know, we're trusting that our ancestors have had the strength to rebuild and carry on before, and that we will have the same strength to rebuild and carry on. And it's, to me, it's just kind of this beautiful like homage to resiliency, you know, to being able to envision a different world, right? It's that that guidance that comes deeply from within, that knowing that maybe where we are is incredibly screwed up and we all like, we need to see that before we can build something new. You know, everyone needs to see that, because otherwise there's not a collective shift. You know, it kind of stays in these small fragments and undercurrents who are seeing something that everybody else hasn't woken up to. So it's, yeah, it's just an uncovering, I think. And anytime anything's uncovered, it can be a little scary. What am I going to see there? But, you know, like I said, we've all had people who have gone through it before, and understanding that we're their descendants, that obviously they lived long enough to pass on that memory of resiliency, that we all carry that too.
Amazing. Do you know what? There's something that's been playing in my head. I'm going to look these words up. You probably remember it off by heart. I keep hearing the song "Them Bones."
Oh yeah, that's actually a.
I just want to. I want to pull the. I want to pull the lyrics up just so I can see it. Is there anything in that that relates to what you do? I've got it here now. It's just about the connection to the bones. Yeah, hear the word of the Lord.
It is, and I've always kind of liked it because I grew up Catholic, but I have had my own experience with religion and what I believe and what I don't believe, and have come to a place that I feel very comfortable with my own belief system. But I've always kind of liked it because, to me, it talks about our connection to like the deepest place in our body, which to me is the bones, is like the marrow, is that like earth to memory, and also being the connection point of soul. In the song, you know, it's the connection point to the Lord, right? You're hearing the word of the Lord through them.
Yeah.
But to me, that's where I hear my soul speak. That's where I hear my guidance come through. And I go through that a little bit in a course that I teach. It's called Know Your Bones, but we talk about the marrow, and all of our bones resonate with a different element. Everybody kind of thinks bones earth because archetypally that's what they are. But there's also this whole system in the bones that resonate with different elements. And so what I call our water bones are the ones that are flowing the information. The earth bones are the ones that kind of like store and hold on to things that either can be passed on as trauma or can be what I call composted, right? They can be turned into something better to help propel us forward. We have air bones, which are really our joints, but our vertebrae are all air bones. And that's kind of where we come into alignment, where it's almost like the analytical air element kind of releases what's not serving us, what's not in alignment with us. People who have a lot of joint issues are holding on to things and kind of like overriding that. And then we have fire bones, which transmute, which they're the point that's kind of like taking everything and going like, oh, we can turn this into something better. And if we let it all go and work on its own without getting our brain involved or our ego or any of that stuff, like it's this beautiful system. But there's the fifth element, quote unquote, which is ether, right? Which is spirit. And that is the marrow. That's what's like in like the very depth, in the very center of the bones. And speaking from a scientific perspective, the human body itself, because of the way it organizes, creates an electromagnetic field. But there's also this, it's like a different field. It's actually like the electromagnetic field, contrary to popular opinion, is not your aura. Your aura is what I call the Magneto electric field. It's like the reverse of that. And they stay anchored together because they are the reverse. And they connect in at the bones. And whenever those two come together, it's like this beautiful sense of like neutrality, of space, of, you know, what many other cultures have called like chi or ki or prana. Like that's where I see that running for us, is in the center of the bones. And that's why, to me, like that's the connection with source, because that's where I can find it. Yeah, that was a very long answer for that question.
No, but that's just like, no, you had me like dreaming of all this. Like that's beautiful. Thank you so much, because it's really just shed light into like, your fascinating modality. It's just given me just, I'm like, I don't get it. Not say I don't get it. I understand it more, you know, because it's just like, and the way that you also articulate and explain it paints a picture. It just does. I'm sure anyone who listens to this as you're speaking will actually see it actually almost light up, like you know you're talking about. I was just seeing like kind of like, you know, everything kind of just like visually just literally lighting up like an animation. I'm like, oh, I see, okay, I get it now. Yeah, this you know. And then but then you think it sounds so unique, but then it's like, but it makes so much sense. You know, it's just like, but hang on, it's just like it is the core. It is, you know, we talk about the backbone. It makes total sense. So thank you for that. That's been such a fascinating conversation. So exciting for me that I get to do this.
Well, that's what I find whenever I speak to people. Like, it's that moment of course, you know, but of course. And whenever you get down into it, like they really do communicate with the rest of our body, because, you know, the ligaments attach the muscles, and like the blood actually starts in the center of the bones and it runs throughout everywhere else in the body, and cellular structure. And there's this like really beautiful connection that happens. But I've always said that I feel like I'm bringing it forward now because we're ready for it. You know, like there have been other modalities that have really paved the way to being like, oh, okay, you know, of course there's energy in the body and this is how it flows. But I think coming all the way into like the very foundational part of where it, at least in my perspective, originates in the body, it's just like it kind of connects all of the other systems. You can be like, oh, I see where the chakras connect then, because there's an energy flow running through the spine. You know, I can see where the meridians would connect, or send lines in Thai, or all of these other beautiful modalities that we have are all connected in at the bones. And it's just, it's so foundational, and I get so excited talking about it.
Good. That's what we need to hear. People that are just passionate about what they're doing. It's so good. So let me ask you these her conversation questions.
Sure.
So the first one is, what is the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
So I read a lot. And when I was thinking about this question, I was like, no, I'm going to discount all of the things that I've read in books, because, you know, that wasn't like something that personally was given to me. It feels like it was just kind of something disseminated to everybody. And what I really hit upon was my Reiki master teacher. Whenever I was trying to figure out what it was that I did, how I knew, how I saw, was she gave me this phrase, and I use it when I teach my students too, was notice how you notice what you notice. And I think so many of us walk around each day saying things like, I don't know, or I can't tell, or I wish I knew the answer to that, because we're really disconnected from our internal noticing. And if we would learn how our body and guidance speaks to us, then we'd have far fewer of those I don't know moments. You know, we might have moments where we say, I don't know right now, but I know how to find out, right? Like I'll know what I'm noticing and how I'm noticing it, and allow that, you know, to guide me. And I use that for all of my students, because they come in and they want to know, like, well, I don't see things. And I'm like, okay, that's not your way of noticing. You know, do you hear things? Do you just know things? Like, you need to notice how you're noticing what you're noticing. You don't just need to notice what you're noticing, because it's like that is going to be what guides you to your knowing.
Fabulous. That's so good, because the last thing that we're taught to do is rely on our instincts. You know, same friend that I was talking to earlier, we were just talking about how we can help, because I'm saying, like, when we come out of this, the world's going to need so many more healers than there are therapists available. You know, there's going to be such a call for it, and people are going to need to be able to reach out. And you know, it's you know, when we were speaking, she's like, yeah, and I realized I thought about this years ago, and I wanted to do this, and it's just in having this conversation I'm remembering this thing. But it was because she didn't trust her own voice that she put it to one side, even though countless people had kind of suggested, why don't you do this? And like, she'd kind of been drawn to a certain modality, and it felt really good, but it'd been like, yeah, but you know, who's going to believe me? You know, really discounting it, because like you say, we're not noticing how you're noticing, because we just get told a certain thing, and the way that the world has been up until this point is rewarding you for regurgitating some information, as opposed to critical thinking, which is what everything needs right now. We all need to be thinking critically about everything that we see, everything that we hear, everything that we feel, and what we're going to do about it. And it requires individual thought as opposed to groupthink, and you're not going to get a prize for it. In fact, it's probably going to be the opposite. If you kind of like put your hand up and go, I you know, I'm seeing something that is this direction. You know, we have to be sovereign in ourselves to, like you say, notice how you notice what you notice, and be confident to go, this is kind of like what it looks like to me, even when it looks like nothing like that to anybody else.
Yeah, we're really shifting from like a pyramid model, which is someone up here says something and it trickles down to, you know, everyone below them, quote unquote, below them, to, and it's funny, this was a conversation I was having yesterday, because I was like, we're not moving into a circle, because that's a model that we have had. And I don't feel like we're going back to something that we have had previously. I feel like we're moving into this really interesting paradigm where it's not, like you said, it's not going to be groupthink. We're not going to be speaking one to many. It's going to feel like we're always speaking one to one. And I don't know if that means we're always speaking one to one, like one to ourselves, or one to our higher self, our soul, or one to another person. I was like, but what it looks like to me, whenever I visualize this and I see it, and I just kind of feel into what's wanting to come forward, is it looks like every single person is kind of at the center of their own pond ripple, like that own original thought. And then that connects to other people who are kind of on their edges, and they take that original thought and then they think critically and originally about it as well. And it's this kind of web that just ends up covering and connecting everyone, but in a vastly different way than we've experienced before.
Oh, like, I'm nodding. I can't nod enough. Because that's the conversation we were having. It's like, well, what's it going to look like, and what's it going to be? And I'm like, do you know what? I personally can't see it, and I like to think that I can like roll my head out, but I'm like,
I know.
you know, but even with the limited, you know, knowledge that I have, I still can't imagine it. I know that, you know, we're talking about technology, but even with the limited knowledge I have of technology, what is coming in is outside of like anything that I can imagine. We think what we've got is great, but we know that we're still, you know, they're probably 10, 15 years holding on to things that they could release tomorrow. I'm like, we could be like teleporting, we don't know what it is that is available now that's been held back to release to us at whatever level they, you know, the top down thinks is a reasonable timescale for us. But in the change, I'm with you thinking it's like, is it, you know, it ripples out, but it is about individualism, but then also it all clicks in and it all works as one, and it's going to create such a different energy, a different experience, a different I can't even find the words for it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a different experience of individuality, right? Or individualism, because, you know, when we talk about that now, it's like you kind of picture that very like selfish person, right? Who's only thinking about themselves. And I feel like in this case, it's more of like, it is individualism, it's sovereignty, but it's also understanding the responsibility to the whole, which I feel like is something that has been greatly lost.
Yeah.
You know, it's this, there's not words, you know, like there's,
yeah, because it's
just not words.
It's just an excitement and an expectation and a possibility, and because we haven't experienced it, this potential utopian, but then there's still not that additional word that's going to tie it into a thing. So it's like it's moving into an experience that we knew on a, you know, if I think about it, the experience of coming from oneness to be an individual and experience like 3D experience, and what it could be, you know, and we can feel elements of oneness if we go into deep meditation and contemplation, is having that feeling in a waking collective way. So we're, like you say, all connected to that oneness of ourselves, but still being individual and creative in that individual. But, you know, that top-down model, whatever, you know, a boss is always an indication of the culture of the company. So if we do have that kind of real selfish point at the top, then, you know, everyone is then going to be in their own way pretty much selfish, because, you know, this is the model that we're all looking to. But then if we stop looking up at this one model and start kind of just opening up and allowing it, who knows, you know, I'm still figuring it out on a day. These are the thoughts that I have when I go for a walk in the park.
Similar to mine. I'm like, is everybody else thinking about this intensely?
Like, what's utopia? What's the future like for it? Yeah. These are the things that I consider on a just stroll, you know, to the supermarket on a sunny day. Yeah. These are what I'm thinking about. But back to the questions. Anyway, what woman represents higher energetic resonance to you?
This one's going to be, it's going to feel like a cop-out answer, I am absolutely certain, but I'm going to have to put it out there because I think we all do. I have a very hard time looking around and pinpointing like one person that is in this, you know, higher energetic resonance, quote unquote, more than, you know, anyone else, or representing it more than anyone else, because I think we all have the capacity to do that. And whenever I close my eyes and I ask that question, I literally see every single woman, female identifying, you know, however you want to use that term, light up, because that capacity is held within ourselves. Will we all choose it? No. You know, that may not be the path in this lifetime, but it's there in every single person. So whenever I tap into that question and I'm asking it, it's kind of like, it's here. You know, it's here for all of us. And I think maybe that's even leading into what we were just talking about, or circling back to what we were just talking about, you know, that breakdown of the pyramid and into that kind of collective, like, we all have it.
Yeah, that's, you know, that's a word that I've been like repeating ad nauseum recently, is self-sovereignty, sovereignty. It's just, you know, let's reclaim this, you know. And for me, you know, the way that I kind of tagged it was her higher energetic resonance and tools for the awakening woman. And even when I think about that now, I'm just thinking, I, at some point, talking about branding and wording, at some point I'm going to need to rejig that a little bit, because it's not, you know. And I've been aware of, you know, it's bringing in, and it's not even about a gender thing or, you know, gender identifying. It's about an energy, that female energy. So, you know, I know that is something I'm going to have to just kind of reshape, keep the her, but just something around that just needs to kind of be carved around a little bit more to make it just more in line with the way that things are going, because just calling it women and men is just closing off to, you know, men.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that. So yeah, that's, you know, that's me just like looking, going, okay, I'm starting to look like, you know, these bones need a little bit of taking some things off, and just not being so antiquated in my thought around what it should be, just because that's what it was, you know, and has been up until this point. So yeah, I'm always aware that at the core of that there's a change that needs to come from myself, because of what I see happening for the males that are ready, the male who are ready to open up, embrace that, but then also for us to embrace whatever masculine energy is. And we still don't 100% know, because there's been a version of it that means just like donning on trousers and kind of like bullishly going through, and that's not necessarily it, because that's usually a very like wounded, toxic man that uses that kind of way to navigate through the world. It's like, you know, it's usually just like this unheard boy, you know, that's grown up and has kept these patterns on. So anyway, we're digressing. I'm going back to you. What are your favorite self-care rituals and practices?
I am a Cancer moon, which is a water sign. And the moon is really how we emotionally tend to ourselves in our chart. And it is incredibly telling for me, because all of my favorite self-care rituals and practices are water-based. It doesn't matter if it's a bath or like, well, a lot of times it's outdoors and water-based. Like even if I'm in the bath, like I want the windows open so that there's like an element of nature coming in. But, you know, laying down in a stream, swimming in a lake, outdoor showers, anything like that for me is like the deepest way to nurture myself and get back to that feeling of like centeredness and self-care and presence. There's something about water that makes me be incredibly present. I think more so than, well, maybe fire, but more so than any other element. Like I'm just, there's something about it that just kind of like sparks me back to being me.
Yeah. Beautiful. And so what do you have coming up? Have you got new courses, new, what's new for you?
Yeah, I am. So I just created something, which means I'm kind of in this pause now where it's like, oh gosh, I have no idea about what's next. Because I'm really nurturing it right now. And I think what's next is just continuing to grow that. And so for a while, I've kind of known that my courses and stuff are going to end up standing alone. Like they're going to kind of have their own, like, not really academy, but like basically their own container that kind of holds them. And it's like the wisdom and the teaching and a way for people to really get in touch deeply with what their bones hold, and a way for them to like tap in, because everyone's bones hold different things. So like I can't come out and kind of just say this is exactly what everything is. But the courses are a way to get you to tap into your bones, to understand your own bone wisdom, to understand how you notice what you notice, and really kind of deeply embody it. And so I've started to kind of build that out on a site. It's Skelementary School, because I adore puns, and I could not let that one pass.
Well, if you don't, someone's going to bring it to you, so you might as well, right?
Yes. So it's skelementaryschool.com, and it's literally like elementary with an SK at the beginning. And over there right now is where you can access what I call the meditation lounge, or the lounge. And it is all of the meditations, like bone and body based meditations, and like longer energy healing sessions, like 45 minutes to an hour long. They're all housed there, and it's basically like a membership. So you can like use them, access them, take yourself through an entire healing journey, as long as you're a member. And you can just kind of log in and go through it. I've got a couple different paths laid out because people will come to it and be like, I have no idea where to start, right? So I've laid out a couple different paths that you can kind of tap into and feel out and see, if that's what really meets where you're wanting to go. Or if you are extremely like soul led, tapped in, understand your own wisdom, and it's leading you there and like on your own journey, then that's obviously completely welcome as well. And it's really my first step in saying I'm releasing control and expectation of what this has to be and allowing everyone to have their own experience and expectation of what something is. And so basically you can join for 7 days for free, so that you don't have to like immediately sign up for a membership and then, it doesn't meet what you were thinking, or really it's not quite for you, or, whatever that feeling is. Because what I call it is basically like a commitment to yourself, right? Like it's that commitment to sitting down and to getting to know yourself deeper. And it's always got to be aligned, because if it's not, it's going to feel off and it's going to feel forced. So I want you to deeply feel into if that's aligned, and then, the membership will start if it is the path for you. So it's going to be growing, which is why like that's kind of what I'm kind of committed to nurturing right now. Is it's going to have a new energy healing session every month and 2 new meditations. So it continues to grow with where I'm exploring. It continues to grow with where the members are exploring. And there's this nice little question mark in the bottom right-hand corner. And if you're ever getting stuck or saying, I don't know where to go next, or I'd really love to tap into this, there's nothing here to support that, you just send me a little email and I will sit down and feel into if that's going to be a whole healing session, if it's a meditation that you need, and we'll just create it for the collective. It'll go up for all of the members to benefit everybody. So I'm really loving it and kind of playing in that space and interacting just, through email and questions with the people who are coming in and helping them kind of find their own path to their own guidance, which is my favorite.
Good for you. It sounds so great, and it's beautiful as well that you're open to, if there's an area that someone feels that they need something, that you're open to add something in and create it, as opposed to being so rigid in it having to be a certain way, or if you're not getting it's not everyone does that.
Well, it's been something I've been toying with for a very long time, because to book in an hour session with me is an investment. And so I would get a lot of emails, and I've done group sessions before, and that's how I tend to keep things more affordable, is I would do a group session around a specific theme. And so whoever's feeling that theme, whoever's really kind of working with something along those lines, that gives them a way in and a way to heal. And honestly, the group sessions tend to be extremely powerful, because it is like that amplification of everyone who's joined, which is just amazing energy. But I would get a lot of emails saying, I can't, like, this is something that I'm really feeling into. I can't do a one-on-one session. Is this something you'd be willing to do a group session for? And so that's how many of those have come up. But so now what I've done is I've given them a home, so people can still say, is this something you'd be willing to do a session for? And so if I'm going to do a live group session, anyone who's a member of the lounge can join those for free. So, if it's a group session and I'm kind of opening it to the public for $22, $33, whatever it ends up being, they all have access to that too, just within the membership fee. So it's kind of, it's an amazing bonus, but yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And can you just let everyone know where we can find you, your social media, or your websites, plural, as you got as well?
Absolutely. Yes, my website is going to be evolving so that I can connect the two better, but I haven't gotten there yet. So on Instagram, it is the @ for the handle, and then energy_archaeology. And so it's ARCHAEOLOGY. On Facebook, I'm not really on Facebook all that much, but I know there are people who are on Facebook who aren't on Instagram. So everything on Instagram kind of just auto posts over to Facebook. But if you want to find me there, it's Ashley Stinson at Energy Archeology. So you can search either my name or Energy Archeology, and it should bring up my business page there, or through my website, which is ashleystinson.com, and it's STINSON.com, or skelementaryschool.com. And so as of right now, they don't speak to each other. They are two separate things that will be coming. Little evolution that is business, right?
The wonderful world of the web, yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been such an education for me to just find out about you, and for you to like share your work. And I know that people are going to get so much value and knowledge from this as well, even if all they do is just consider their bones more, and just give, you know, a little bit more of just like personal respect to their structure, because, you know, without bones, what are we? Just a blob of tissue. We're nothing there. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was an amazing conversation to have. I really appreciated it.
No problem. Thank you, Ashley, for being a guest on this week's Her Conversations, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com. That's carolmaywhittick.com. And you can follow me on Facebook under the same name, and on Twitter and on Instagram at Casmic. That's at CAZMICK. So until the next episode, have a great week and speak to you soon. Take care.